Hello and welcome to Lesson 8, Cognition and Development, Mirror Neurons. In this session we're going to look at the role and function of mirror neurons and how they may be tailored or tied to the process of social cognition. Before that, I just want to share this quote from Ramachandran, who says that mirror neurons will do for psychology what the discovery of DNA did for biology. Essentially, he believes that they have the potential to explain all sorts of phenomena within the field. So, let's have a look at what some key questions are when we're talking about mirror neurons. The first one is obviously, what is a mirror neuron? And this will be the first question I ask you next time. How are the mirror neurons involved in imitation and processes linked to social cognition? We'll look at that during this presentation. Do mirror neurons function the same in humans and monkeys? We may not quite cover this, but this would be a very interesting question to go away and actually investigate. What role do mirror neurons have in social cognition? Crucial, that's the topic under discussion. And what is single unit recording? So with those questions in mind, and we can always return to them at any point, let's get stuck into mirror neurons. Let's recall what a neuron is then. A neuron is a nerve cell. And the neuron, the typical motor neuron, can be seen here. We have the soma, the cell body, we have the axon, and we have the axon terminus. This side we have the dendrites, the nucleus, and of course we have our myelin sheath. We have the nosum rhambier, and we have a directional transmission of the action potential which moves away from the soma along the axon to the axon terminus. When it reaches the terminus, it stimulates the release of neurotransmitter, which then diffuse across the synaptic cleft and bind with receptor sites on the postsynaptic neuron. Neurons can be excitatory or inhibitory, just to remember those key terms. And in this case, what we're looking at is what happens when we observe behavior in others and act ourselves. Are neurons firing in both those instances, and what role do mirror neurons have? So that's just a very quick recap of the neuron. Let's talk about discovery then. So it's one of the most significant scientific discoveries of all time, especially in neuroscience, and it sparked a huge wealth of recent research. Mirror neurons are basically specific types of neurons. We looked at one just a moment ago, and they fire not only when the animal acts, but also when the animal sees another animal act as well. So here we see monkey do. So when the monkey performs an action like grasping a banana, activity in the brain can be registered. We can correlate that with the action. What's really interesting is those same areas also seem to be active when the monkey sees someone else grasp the banana. And that's monkeys and humans in this case. So really, these neurons are firing not only when we act, but when we register someone else's action. We are firing essentially these mirror neurons for both action and observation. Now that's interesting, and we'll see why in a minute. But let's just look at the discovery. So, Rizzolatti is credited with the discovery of mirror neurons and some of the early work with them. And he used something called single unit recording. Now this is an ingenious technique that allows scientists to actually record the activity of a single neuron. A monkey reached for a peanut, and the F5 neuron in the prefrontal cortex fired. We'll see where the F5 is in there. The F5 is thought to be responsible for voluntary movement. So that's interesting. The researchers noted that the F5 was firing even though the monkey itself was inactive. All the monkey was doing was watching another monkey reach for a peanut. They concluded that the neuron fired because the monkey was watching another, and then they developed this idea that the mirror neuron not only fires when you act, but also fires when you observe someone else acting. This is important for things like imitation, and we'll get to that in a second. After this accidental discovery, and some of the best discoveries in science are accidental, researchers then set out to investigate the action of mirror neurons. They use electrodes to record the activity of individual F5 neurons, so this is this single unit recording. Mirror neurons only fired if interactions between movement and object, so if the monkey reaches for a banana, it didn't fire for arbitrary movements. Mirror neurons do not fire in response to random movements either. So if I'm waving my arms around, your mirror neurons aren't firing. But if I go to do something deliberate, like I've got nothing to grasp, go to press a key, they might, if you see the object as well. Or if I grasp a banana in front of you. Different neurons code for mouth and hand actions, they found, and the neurons themselves can also respond to the sound of an animal performing an action. So if you heard an animal grasping a banana, I can't really imagine what that sounds like, but you get the idea. If you hear the animal doing it, your mirror neurons still fire. So it's not just linked to vision. This is groundbreaking stuff. Why? Because mirror neurons may provide an explanation of how we imitate behaviours. So just before we get stuck deep into that, I'll show you the F5 region, which is what we were talking about. Observing an action, and then this consequential firing of neurons that should normally, or we thought should normally only fire if we were performing the action ourselves. Right, mirror neurons in humans and imitation. So that's quite abstract. You need to know it, but let's apply it to humans and perhaps we'll understand it a bit better. If my mirror neurons fire when I watch you do an action, then this could be the basis of imitation. Imagine very young infants. So Iacoboni et al. In 2010, used fMRI to identify areas of the brain linked to mirror neuron activity. In humans, unlike monkeys, the mirror neuron system can respond to what's called intransitive actions. So actions where an object moves without an external agent, so stuff sort of floating, whereas in monkeys, it was only actions that had a direct cause. Now, this imitative behaviour has been identified, interestingly, in a variety of human interactions. For example, in Meltzoff and Moore's reciprocity study, they showed that babies just a few days old could imitate certain behaviours, such as smiling and tongue protrusion. Now, I know I've given you a study which pretty much wipes that out and refutes it. However, the idea that babies may be equipped to do this, even if they can't quite, is compelling. And although the evidence against Meltzoff and Moore is compelling, is not conclusive. It's not conclusive just yet. So mirror neurons may lay the foundations for imitation. Imitation, we know, is an important part of learning, and it may well be an important part of perspective taking and empathy. Now, there is something very interesting. We do not compulsively imitate each other. So imagine, just like the reflex just below your knee, if I hit it with a hammer, your leg kicks out, you can't control it. That's an uncontrollable action. But our mirror neurons don't work the same. So we don't see someone waving their hand and automatically wave back. We don't see someone banging their head and automatically copy them. Why? There must be some restraint mechanism. Well, the argument goes that the mirror neuron system is offline most of the time and only comes online in certain circumstances. However, there is evidence of people who have echolalia, which is a form of compulsive behaviour where they imitate anything that the adult does. I'll show you a video of this in the next lesson. But it's very interesting. There seems to be a malfunction in this mirror neuron system. So you will say, I'm going to the shops, and they'll say, I'm going to the shops. They can't help themselves. They must imitate. Sometimes it's visual, sometimes it's linguistic. So they'll imitate what you say. There's a link there if you want a preview, but I will show you in class. Now, some behaviours we do find really difficult to prevent ourselves from imitating, even if we don't have echolalia, and that's things like yawning and smiling. If someone smiles at you, it's really hard not to smile, though I suspect perhaps you aren't right now. Try it. No? Alright, let's move on. Mirror neurons and social cognition. This is what we're after. We're after this idea that mirror neurons might provide a biological basis for social cognition. So, interesting research by AQA here. 2005 conducted a study to demonstrate that mirror neurons might encode more than just what the action is, but also why. In other words, they might encode intention. So participants were shown 3 different types of movie clips, and they were all related to the concept of tea party. And fMRI was used to measure neuronal activity. Now, highest levels of motor neuron activity in the inferior frontal cortex for this intentional clip. So this clip clearly shows intention. Here you have a full cup of coffee. Obviously this is the action case and this is the situation. This is an intention. Full cup, what are you going to do with it? Drink it. So they registered activity for intentional acts as well. And the same with cleaning up. You see the mess, the intention from this you can draw just by looking at it. And that's your mirror neuron system according to these guys. Why does that matter? Why does it matter that we can register intention? Well, if you think about it, just imitating behaviour is good for learning, but it's not very good for understanding others. Intention is important. If someone hits you as a child, understanding if they did it on purpose or did it accidentally is crucial to your response to some extent, and to understanding them as others. This brain region is linked to understanding of others, and that's quite a dramatic finding. So you can see the activity in different parts of the brain for the intention versus non-attention. Applications then. So that's the basics. Mirror neurons, they may provide a sort of biological basis for social cognition through imitation and through perhaps even empathy, and we'll see where we go from there. So Williams et al. 2001 suggests that mirror neuron abnormalities may underlie certain autistic behaviours or specific behaviours such as difficulty in copying others. That's something that autistics can struggle with, is if you try to show them how to do something, it can be quite challenging. DePreto et al. Found reduced activity in the inferior frontal gyrus, which is known to be part of the mirror neuron system, and this suggests cognitive deficits faced by autistics have an underlying biological cause. So this is strong biological evidence for the role of mirror neurons in autism, and then by proxy, theory of mind and perspective taking. Eisenberg argues that empathy is likely to be the basis for pro-social behaviour. Pro-social behaviour is positive social behaviour. Thinking of others, golden rule, all that stuff. And that empathy is built on the mirror neuron system. You've got Galeese and Goldman in your notes, have a little read. Right, one way we can investigate any biological activity is essentially to damage the brain and observe the results. Now, we can't go around damaging healthy brains, but luckily people sometimes, unfortunately for them, damage their brain, and as a result we can analyse the effects. So KF, HM, classic studies. Trano et al. 2003 found that patients with damage to the left premotor area of the brain and the associated regions here could identify pictures of motor actions, but they could not retrieve the words associated with those actions. So they could watch you doing something but couldn't retrieve the words. Now this shows that disruption to these mirror neuron areas does cause cognitive deficits, specifically in this case linguistic interpretation. So it's important to understand that mirror neurons are not just linked to sort of imitation, but also understanding of actions and the ability to explain them. However, some have argued that mirror neurons are an insufficient explanation. So Churchland, for example, notes that mirror neurons are just neurons, and that high-level circuitry are responsible for determining intention. So it's not the neurons themselves, it's the emergent properties of neurons that cause it. It's a bit like saying, neurons are responsible for language production. Well, yeah, but individual neurons that all work together in a specific area of the brain are really what is causing this phenomenon. So Hayes' mirror neurons are basically a result of classical conditioning, they claim, suggesting their function is just a result of experience. So you learn to associate your action with someone else's, observing someone else, and that's why they fire. Therefore, it's an experienced-based development, not an innate one. And Alison Gopnik has been quite a fierce critic of mirror neurons, and she suggests that actually much of our understanding of mirror neurons has been sort of blown over. It's one of those strange things in science, a bit like dark energy or other physics explanations like Schrodinger's cat or action at a distance, where lots of people use it to explain a cornucopia of different ideas, when in fact it may be much simpler. So she says that it's been used to explain everything from altruism, doing good for no benefit to yourself, right down to sort of autism and all sorts of other behaviours. She would argue that the mirror neuron system is too simple to really explain these complex behaviours. Eisenberg suggests that that this is wrong. Children can first feel, for example, another's distress, and that based on this mirror neuron system, at a basic, imitation, understand or feeling of someone else's distress, and then on top of that, perspective taking, being able to put yourself in someone else's position, and then on top of that, more broader social cognition. All this stuff, if you go to think about Bayesian, is like these really basic rules that build up to what is very complex social cognition. A few further issues. Brain imaging is not very precise, so if we use fMRI scans, the resolution isn't perfect just yet, so we're getting general regional activity. However, you know that although the brain functions are distributed and localized, they're not perfectly sort of segregated in a specific area. There's lots of systems that sort of intertwine with each other. The mirror neuron system does not take personality into account. So if you think about intentions, how stable a person is, their characteristics and such, there is, mirror neuron says there's pretty much one explanation almost for everything. And there's no evidence that the mirror neuron system can account for different types of intention driven by personality. So if I smile at you, am I smiling at you because I like you, or am I smiling at you because I'm trying to elicit goodwill or I need something from you? Limits on generalization. Most information on the role of the mirror neuron system has come from animal research, comparative research. And we already found some differences between a monkey's ability to, for example, register movement that isn't directed by an agent compared to humans, and there may be other very important differences between humans and monkeys. Monkeys, for example, are far less skillful in inferring actions. We are masters in interpreting social phenomena. We don't always get it right, but we're very good at the skill. The relationship between the mirror neuron system and autism is not actually entirely clear. Yes, we know that difficulty in understanding someone else's perspective is key, but we don't know if it's a causal or a correlational effect. Does autism result in an impaired mirror neuron system, or is it the system that drives the development of autism? We've come across this criticism in Baron Cohen's work and others. Before we finish up, I try to make this clear as much as I can, but there are so many synoptic links, and really this specification, what is nice about it, it's all about dragging stuff from other topics together to give yourself a holistic view. So think about what we've covered, and these are just a few areas in this one session. We've looked at stuff from year one, developmental psychology, imitation, reciprocity. We've looked at biopsychology, we've looked at the neuron systems and what makes up a neuron, how it fires, stuff like that. The basic biological approach, and all those evaluations could be used in this explanation. You could have a nice bit of A01 saying what the mirror neuron system is, and then lots of criticisms of the biological approach. Those some specific criticisms would make a better essay as well. So there's lots and lots, and there may even be a tenuous link to psychopathology when we talk about echolalia and some of the things that can go wrong. So it is one big subject, everything feeds in to everything else. Now, before next session, I would like you to think of some interesting questions that you would like to ask about mirror neurons. Think about where they might apply beyond this particular research and what other phenomena might be influenced by mirror neurons if the system is as the researchers suggest. And one possible exam question you could get asked is discuss the biological explanations of social cognition. It would not necessarily be strictly reduced to mirror neurons, but that would be the bulk of your essay. Equally, I should have said, mirror neurons would go well in an essay on perspective taking as an evaluation point, and of course theory of mind. So feel free to use all this stuff in those other sections that we've looked at as well. So that's the end of this session. As always, thank you very much for your time, and I will see you around. Bye.